Is there a pain sharper than giving your whole heart, your last dollar, and even your health to someone you raised, only for them to look you in the eye and say you are no longer their family? If you've ever felt the sting of being forgotten after years of sacrifice, then you will understand the story I'm about to tell. But before I begin, allow me to lift up a prayer for you. May the Lord cover you with peace, strengthen your bones, and keep the light of joy burning in your home. If you are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, I pray your children and grandchildren never forget how much you have given them. May your hands never go empty, may your body never lack healing, and may you be surrounded by love in your final years, not abandonment. My name is Dorothy Miller. I am 73 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that love often costs more than money. I thought I had understood sacrifice when I buried my husband Frank decades ago and raised my daughter Rebecca alone in our little home in Cedar Falls, Iowa. But nothing tested the limits of my giving spirit more than what I did for my grandson Tyler. When he called me one February morning to share that he had been accepted into Northwestern University's architecture program, my heart nearly burst with pride. He was my only grandson, the joy of my later years, the boy who used to help me plant tomatoes in my garden and stay up late listening to my stories. But his scholarship covered only part of the cost, and his parents were already drowning under bills. That left only me. At that time, I had scraped together just over $42,000, my life savings, the emergency fund I had guarded for decades, money I had planned for medical needs, home repairs, and the unexpected storms of old age. Yet, looking at his graduation picture on my mantelpiece, I told myself that no storm in my life was greater than his dream. So I opened my hands and gave him nearly everything I had. For 4 long years, I stretched every dollar thinner than paper. I watered down soups, wore sweaters to bed instead of turning up the furnace, and sometimes cut my medication in half so he could have what he needed for books and supplies. I smiled through it all, never letting him see the truth of how much it cost me. Because isn't that what grandmothers do? We carry the weight silently, so the young can walk freely. But here's where the ache lies, dear friend. After all of that, when the day finally came for him to walk across that stage in his cap and gown, I thought my sacrifices had borne fruit. I thought we would embrace, cry tears of joy, and remember the long road that got him there. Instead, he turned to me, with strangers at his side, and said words that cut deeper than any blade. "Don't ever call me Grandma again." Yes, those were his words. After all I gave, after all I endured, stay with me, because what follows will make you question how far love should go when it is not returned. And if you have ever poured yourself out for someone who later made you feel invisible, then you will feel every word of what I am about to tell you. But before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel, and in the comments, tell me where in the world you're listening from. I read them, I pray for you, and I carry your burdens in my heart as I tell these stories. Because this is not just my story. It is the story of countless grandparents who gave everything, only to be told they were nothing. Cedar Falls, Iowa, is not a place for grand living. It's a town where neighbors wave as they pass by, where Sunday church bells are louder than the traffic, and where folks make do with what they have. My home was a small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same one where I raised my daughter Rebecca after my husband Frank died of cancer 30 years earlier. The walls carried memories of laughter and struggle, the floorboards creaked with age, and though the furnace groaned in winter, it was the only place that truly felt mine. At 73, I had settled into a rhythm. My days were measured by the tick of the grandfather clock Frank had built with his own hands. My Social Security check arrived each month like clockwork, and I stretched it carefully. Enough for groceries, enough to cover electricity, and just enough for the medicines that kept my heart steady and my joints from locking up. What gave me the most comfort, however, was the small savings I had managed to protect. $42,000. It wasn't wealth, but it was security. It was my promise to myself that if sickness or disaster came, I wouldn't have to beg. Then, one February morning, the phone rang. "Grandma, I got in." Tyler's voice burst through the line. He had been accepted into Northwestern University's architecture program. His excitement spilled over so quickly that I almost forgot my aching knuckles gripping the receiver. He was my only grandson, my joy, the boy who had spent summers in my garden pulling weeds and winters by my side listening to bedtime stories. Now he was ready to step into the future he had dreamed of since childhood. But there was a catch. The scholarship he had earned covered only 60% of the cost. His parents, my Rebecca and her husband David, were barely surviving. Rebecca worked endless shifts at the hospital, often too tired to even eat dinner when she came home. David had been laid off from the John Deere plant. There was no money left for extras, let alone for the towering cost of college. "Grandma," Tyler's voice softened, almost apologetic, "I need $38,000 for the first year. That doesn't even include room, board, or books." 38,000. Out of my 42. Would you risk your health and comfort for your grandchild's future? That question weighed on me heavier than the Iowa snow piling up outside my window. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I looked across my living room at Frank's picture on the mantel. His warm smile stared back at me through the glass, and I could almost hear his voice. "Dorothy, love isn't something you save for emergencies. It's something you give freely, trusting it will return." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Frank's old recliner with the heating bill on the table, my medications lined up neatly beside me, and Tyler's dream tugging at my heart. By dawn, I knew my choice. Within weeks, I had gone to the bank, withdrawn nearly all of my savings, and written the first check. The loan officer looked at me as though I were surrendering my very lifeline. Maybe I was. But when Tyler sent me pictures from campus, his smile brighter than the Chicago skyline behind him, I told myself it was worth every penny. What followed were years of hidden sacrifices. I began shopping at the cheapest store across town, filling my cart with dented cans and day-old bread. I told myself it tasted the same. I canceled my cable television and stopped renewing my magazines. When the furnace finally broke during one of Iowa's brutal cold snaps, I wrapped myself in every blanket I owned and pretended it was cozy. My neighbors eventually noticed and helped with repairs, but I never breathed a word of it to Tyler. He was busy thriving. As his life blossomed, mine shrank. My meals became bowls of soup stretched across days. I wore sweaters inside to keep the heating bill down. My old washing machine died, and I started dragging laundry to the coin laundromat, smiling at strangers and pretending it was an outing rather than a necessity. When my prescriptions grew too costly, I cut pills in half, telling myself half a dose was better than none. Dr. Brennan, my physician, frowned during my visits. "Dorothy, your blood pressure is dangerously high. Are you taking your medication as prescribed?" I lied with a smile. "Of course, doctor." Meanwhile, Tyler called me with stories of his professors, his classmates, his sketches of the Chicago skyline. "Grandma, they say I have real talent. One day I could design buildings like the Willis Tower." I listened with pride, never letting him hear the quiet rumble of my stomach or the rattle of my furnace struggling to stay alive. Every few weeks, another request would come. $50 for model-making supplies. $100 for a lecture series. $200 for travel to see a famous building. Each time I found a way. By Christmas, I wrapped up $500 in an envelope for his spring essentials. His face lit up, and he hugged me tight. "Grandma, you're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you." Neither did I. But the cost was mounting. The winter after his sophomore year nearly broke me. The furnace gave out completely, leaving my house so cold that I could see my breath inside. I spent nights huddled in Frank's chair with a space heater buzzing beside me, terrified the pipes would freeze. Alice, my neighbor, discovered me like that and dragged me into her home until her husband could patch the furnace back together. Still, I never told Tyler. How could I? He was living the dream I had bought for him. To burden him with my suffering felt wrong. My sacrifices, I believed, were mine to bear. And so year after year I kept giving. My savings vanished. My comfort vanished. Even my dignity at times. But I told myself that one day, when he stood tall in his cap and gown, when he shook hands with his professors and began his career, he would look at me and know. He would see the woman who had poured her life into his, and he would honor it. That belief was what kept me alive through those long winters and lonely suppers. Dear listener, have you ever done the same? Have you ever given so much of yourself to family that you began to wonder if you had anything left for yourself? If you have, then you know the quiet ache that never leaves. If you've ever made a sacrifice for a family, drop it in the comments. Let's honor those who gave silently. Graduation day should have been the happiest day of my life. I wore my best navy dress, the same one I had put on years earlier when I walked into the bank to empty my savings for Tyler's tuition. It was looser on me now, hanging differently on my frame after years of penny-pinching meals. Still, I pressed the wrinkles out of it carefully and told myself that no matter what I had endured, this day would make it all worthwhile. The May sun shone brilliantly over Chicago, warming the vast crowd gathered at Northwestern University. I clutched a small gift wrapped neatly in silver paper, a vintage compass I had saved up to buy from an estate sale. It cost me $30 I truly didn't have, but I wanted something meaningful for Tyler, something that told him, follow your dreams, and know you'll never be lost as long as you remember where you came from. When his name was called and I saw him stride across that stage in his cap and gown, my heart leapt. Summa cum laude. Honors. Job offers already lined up. My grandson, the architect I had sacrificed everything for. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were proud tears. For a moment, it felt like all the nights of cold rooms, cut pills, and skipped meals had been worth it. After the ceremony, I hurried to the fountain where Tyler told me to meet him. My feet ached from the long walk, but my spirit was light. I rehearsed what I would say, how proud Frank would have been, how proud I was, how much I believed in his future. When I finally saw him approaching, my breath caught. He wasn't alone. A young woman with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking dress walked beside him, her smile polished but guarded. Behind them followed a man and woman whose clothes spoke of wealth I couldn't even imagine. The father in a tailored suit, the mother dripping with jewelry that sparkled in the sunlight. Tyler, I called out, waving eagerly. His smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it, a flash of discomfort, almost embarrassment, as if he hadn't expected me to be standing there waiting for him. Oh, Grandma Dorothy, he said, his voice tight. You made it. Of course I made it. I wouldn't miss your graduation for anything. I stepped forward, arms open for an embrace, but he leaned in only slightly before pulling back. I ignored it. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, he muttered quickly, then gestured to the group. These are the Washingtons. Amanda's parents. Robert Washington owns Washington Development Group. I smiled politely, extending my hand. Dorothy Miller. Tyler's grandmother. The one who. We know who you are, Mr. Washington cut in smoothly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Tyler's told us all about his family back in Iowa, was it? He said Iowa as though it were a blemish. The young woman, Amanda, gave me a practiced smile. Her mother's eyes, however, traveled down my dress, my scuffed shoes, my simple hair. I felt her judgment like a blade, slicing me into categories. Poor, provincial, unworthy. Still, I pressed on. I brought you something, sweetheart. I handed the wrapped compass to Tyler. For your new adventure. He took it, glancing nervously at Amanda's parents. Thanks, Grandma. That's nice. Won't you open it? I asked, eager to see his reaction. Maybe later, he said quickly. We have dinner reservations. Oh, you must join us. Mrs. Washington interrupted, her voice polite but her tone leaving no doubt she wished otherwise. We're going to Le Bernardin. Do you know it? I didn't, but the way she asked made it clear she expected me not to. That's very kind, I said softly, but I was hoping Tyler and I could have some time together. Just the two of us. It's been so long since. Actually, Grandma, Tyler interrupted, his voice sharp now. Tonight's not great. We've got this whole plan with Amanda's family. Tomorrow's packed too. I'm actually flying out early to New York for work. My heart sank. New York? I thought you were staying in Chicago. Plans change, he said curtly. Look, Grandma, I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm an adult now. I have my own life, my own career. I can't keep being tied down by old obligations. Old obligations. The words landed like a hammer blow. I blinked at him, struggling to understand. Tyler, I'm not trying to tie you down. I just wanted to celebrate. After everything. That's exactly the problem, he snapped. Amanda's parents exchanged satisfied glances. I can't have you reminding me of where I came from. Do you know how embarrassing it is when people hear about my grandmother in Iowa who still lives in some tiny house? This isn't who I am anymore, Grandma. This isn't the life I want. The ground tilted beneath me. Sweetheart, what are you saying? He ran a hand through his hair, just like he used to when he was in trouble as a boy. I'm saying I need space. I can't have you calling me all the time, sending me cookies like I'm still 12. I need you to stop. Don't call me anymore. I stared at him, uncomprehending. You don't want me to call? His voice dropped to a near whisper, but it cut sharper than any shout. Don't ever call me Grandma again. That part of my life is over. The compass slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering on the pavement. By the time I bent to pick it up, Tyler and Amanda were already walking away, her parents murmuring about necessary boundaries and unfortunate family ties. I stood frozen by that fountain for what felt like an eternity. Around me, other families embraced their graduates, snapped photos, laughed, cried tears of joy. And there I was, dismissed like a stranger. The 5-hour drive back to Cedar Falls blurred into darkness and gas station coffee. My hands shook on the steering wheel, replaying every moment, every word. I had given him everything, and now I was nothing. When I arrived home after midnight, my answering machine blinked. For a fleeting second, I hoped it was Tyler calling to apologize. Instead, it was Rebecca. Mom, I heard from Tyler about graduation. He said you probably don't want to talk about it, but I wanted you to know David's back at work, and things are looking up for us. Tyler also mentioned you've been struggling financially to help him through school. He feels terrible. He's going to pay you back, of course, once he gets established. Call me when you get this. I sank into Frank's old chair, numb. Tyler had told her I was struggling. After all the lies I'd told to hide my sacrifices, now he had reduced me to some pitiful case for my own daughter to worry about. Humiliation burned deeper than sorrow. For days, I moved through life like a ghost. At the library where I shelved books, coworkers asked how graduation had gone. I smiled faintly and said, "Oh, it was beautiful." My neighbor Alice brought over a casserole and patted my hand. I thanked her but said little. Inside, I was hollow. Then came the phone call that shifted everything. "Mrs. Miller? This is Amanda Washington." Her voice was syrupy, condescending. I wanted to discuss something. Tyler's concerned about family mementos, photos, letters, childhood things that could complicate his future. Given his public role now, it would be best if those items didn't surface. We'd appreciate it if you could box them up and send them to us. We'll cover shipping, of course. We can even provide compensation for your trouble. For a moment, I couldn't speak. She wanted me to erase my grandson's past. She wanted me to hand over every trace of the boy I had raised, as if my memories were shameful clutter. "I'm sorry," I finally said, my voice shaking. "I don't think I understand." "It's really simple," Amanda replied slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Tyler's moving forward. You want what's best for him, don't you?" I hung up the phone without another word. For the first time since graduation, I felt something other than despair. It was quiet at first, like the rumble of a distant storm. Then it grew. Anger. Pure, steady anger. Can you imagine your own blood treating you like an unwanted shadow? Have you ever been humiliated by the very person you gave everything for? I sat in silence for a long while, staring at the shoebox where I kept Tyler's old report cards, his drawings, his letters. My hands trembled, not from weakness but from the force of what was rising inside me. I had been dismissed, disrespected, humiliated, but I was not done. That was the moment, dear listener, when grief turned into resolve. The morning after Amanda's phone call, I sat in my kitchen staring at the shoebox of Tyler's childhood memories. His handwriting on old birthday cards, his crooked drawings of houses he dreamed of building. Every piece of paper was a reminder of the boy I had once believed would honor me for the rest of his life. Now I saw them differently. They were proof of how far he had fallen, how thoroughly he had betrayed the love poured into him. For the first time in decades, I made a decision that startled even me. I was going to buy a computer. I had never owned one before. Technology was something other people talked about, not something I needed in my quiet home. But if I was going to understand what Tyler had become, I needed tools beyond my landline and my shoebox of keepsakes. Jimmy Patterson, my neighbor Alice's grandson, worked at an electronics store. He set me up with a second-hand laptop and gave me a crash course. "You just type here, Mrs. Miller, and the whole world opens up," he explained with the kind of patience only young people seem to have. I began simply. Into the search box, I typed, "Tyler Miller, Northwestern University Architecture." What I found made my blood run hot. There he was, splashed across an alumni newsletter from only a few months earlier. The headline read, "Self-Made Success, From Rural Roots to Manhattan Heights." Self-made? I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing. The article painted Tyler as a boy who had worked his way through college with minimal family support and a determination to overcome financial hardship. Minimal family support. Financial hardship. The words blurred as anger built in my chest. He had erased me. Every dollar I sacrificed, every meal I skipped, every pill I cut in half, it was as though none of it existed. He had stolen my story and rewritten it to crown himself as a hero. He even had the audacity to be quoted, "I learned early on that no one was going to hand me anything. Everything I've achieved, I've earned myself." I sat back, shaking, staring at the boy I no longer recognized. But there was more. The article mentioned he was about to be featured in Architectural Digest's 30 Under 30 issue. It described his engagement to Manhattan socialite Amanda Washington, calling it a union of architectural promise and philanthropic vision. I kept digging. Soon I found the Washington family's Wikipedia page. Robert Washington wasn't just wealthy. He was deeply connected to city projects worth millions. Amanda herself ran the family's philanthropic arm, which focused on urban housing initiatives. The irony nearly choked me. Tyler's senior thesis, the one I had sold Frank's wedding ring to fund, was a sustainable housing design for the elderly. That very project had won him the Robert Washington Memorial Prize for Sustainable Architecture, a $50,000 award. The Washington Foundation had handed him the prize, and he had accepted it without ever acknowledging the grandmother who had made it possible. I printed the article and placed it on the table. Then I searched for his new firm, Hartwell & Associates. Their website boasted about their rising stars, and there was Tyler front and center. His biography read, "A first-generation college graduate who overcame immense financial obstacles, Tyler Miller brings innovation and Midwestern grit to sustainable urban design." First-generation college graduate? That was a lie. My Rebecca had her nursing degree from Iowa State. The deception piled higher with every page I read. He had built an entire public identity on lies. Still, I needed clarity. I dug into my filing cabinet and pulled out the paperwork I had kept over the years, copies of his financial aid forms. There, in black and white, he had declared himself financially independent. He had even marked me and Frank as deceased. He had claimed hardship to gain extra aid, while at the same time siphoning my life savings. Fraud. Plain and simple. But what did it mean legally? I didn't know. That's when I remembered my nephew Paul. He was a CPA in Des Moines and one of the few relatives who still called me now and then. I picked up the phone. "Paul, it's your Aunt Dorothy. I need some advice." "Of course, Aunt Dorothy. What's going on?" I told him everything. The tuition. The sacrifices. The graduation rejection. The articles. The fraudulent paperwork. He listened quietly until I finished. Then he exhaled sharply. "Jesus, Aunt Dorothy. Pardon my language. This is serious. If Tyler claimed independence while receiving money from you, that's financial aid fraud. The school could revoke his degree, he could face federal charges, and he'd have to repay everything with penalties. What about his new job? The firm? The Washingtons? If he lied on any background checks, if he omitted financial support on official documents, that's also fraud. And if the Washington Foundation gave him money or awards under false pretenses, it could expose them too. These are not small mistakes." I sat silent, holding the phone. "Aunt Dorothy," Paul's voice softened. "Are you thinking of reporting him?" I closed my eyes. I don't know. Part of me wants to protect him. Part of me wants the world to know the truth. I've carried the weight of sacrifice while he's paraded himself as a self-made star. I don't know which part of me will win. After I hung up, I stared at the stack of evidence on my kitchen table. Articles, printouts, financial aid forms, photographs. Tyler's smiling face beamed from every page, built upon a foundation of lies that I had unwillingly cemented with my own hands. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed his words at graduation. "Don't ever call me grandma again." The pain of that rejection burned brighter than any sense of maternal duty. The next morning, I searched again. Hartwell and Associates had just announced a major victory. They had won the contract for the largest affordable housing project in Manhattan's history, a $500 million development to provide homes for thousands of low-income families. And the lead architect on the project? Tyler Miller. There he was in a press photo, shaking hands with the mayor of New York City. The caption read, "Young architect Tyler Miller, winner of the Washington Memorial Prize, will lead the design team on Manhattan's largest affordable housing complex." I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Tyler had taken the money I sacrificed, built his thesis around housing for the elderly, used it to win a prize named after Amanda's grandfather, and was now building his empire on top of lies, while living in a penthouse paid for with Washington money. The hypocrisy was staggering. I pressed my palms together and whispered into the quiet, "They think I am a weak old woman too tired to fight back. But they are wrong. I have nothing left to lose." Dear listener, do you see the injustice? Have you ever watched someone you sacrificed to erase you from their story while building their life on your shoulders? If you believe no sacrifice should ever be erased, share this story so others hear it too. As the days passed, I printed every article, every award announcement, every piece of evidence I could find. I built my own case file, page by page, until it sat like a mountain on my dining room table. But doubt crept in. What would happen if I spoke up? Would I ruin his career forever? Would my daughter blame me? Would I be painted as the bitter grandmother seeking vengeance? I wrestled with those questions in silence. For hours, I sat in Frank's recliner, surrounded by the evidence of Tyler's deceit, praying for clarity. The old Dorothy, the one who cut her pills in half so her grandson could buy supplies, would never have dreamed of exposing him. But the Dorothy sitting there now was different. I had been cast aside, humiliated, treated as an obstacle. And that Dorothy had teeth. With every article I read, with every lie I uncovered, my resolve grew. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth. It was about every grandparent who had ever been taken advantage of, every sacrifice dismissed, every act of love treated as an inconvenience. Tyler thought he had erased me. He thought I was buried under the weight of my own silence. But he was about to learn the most important lesson of his life. When you betray the person who gave everything for you, you awaken a force you never expected. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered to myself, "It's time." 3 weeks after Amanda's phone call, I boarded a bus to New York City. At 73 years old, I had never taken a trip like this alone. My suitcase was small, my knees ached, and I clutched a folder thick with printouts, documents, and the evidence of every sacrifice I had made. This wasn't just a trip for closure. It was a mission. I had managed, after several attempts, to get the attention of Jessica Chen, an investigative reporter for the New York Times. The first few journalists I contacted dismissed me politely. To them, I was just another old woman with a family grievance. But Jessica was different. When I told her Tyler had committed fraud to build his career, her tone sharpened. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop not far from the Times building. Sitting across from her, I felt small but determined. Jessica was young, sharp, with a notebook always in hand and eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Miller," she said gently, "tell me everything." And so I did. I told her about emptying my savings, the cold winters without heat, the skipped medications, the humiliation at graduation, and finally Amanda's demand that I erase Tyler's past. I laid the documents on the table. Financial aid forms where Tyler had claimed I was dead, records of the checks I had written to Northwestern, printed articles declaring him self-made. Jessica leafed through the stack, her pen scratching across her notebook. "This is extensive. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just fraud. It's tied to federal funding, major contracts, and a prominent philanthropic family. Do you realize how big this could get?" I clasped my trembling hands together. "I just want the truth known. He used my sacrifice to build lies. If he had honored me, I never would have said a word. But he tried to erase me. Jessica leaned forward. Then let's make sure he can't. The article ran on a Tuesday morning. The headline blared across the digital front page. The grandmother behind the architect. How financial aid fraud built a rising star. Jessica had been thorough. She interviewed my neighbors in Cedar Falls, my doctor who noticed I'd been cutting my pills, even Martha Henderson at the bank who confirmed the withdrawal of my savings. She traced every tuition payment, every gift I had sent Tyler, and compared them against his fraudulent claims of independence. The story was bigger than just one man. Jessica uncovered how Hartwell and Associates had been hiring young architects with inflated resumes to secure contracts meant for disadvantaged applicants. The Washington Foundation, too, was implicated for handing out awards without proper vetting. Tyler wasn't just a bad apple. He was part of a rotting barrel. The fallout was swift. By noon, Northwestern University announced an investigation into Tyler's degree. The Washington Foundation froze his award and demanded repayment of the $50,000 prize with interest. Hartwell and Associates issued a statement suspending him pending review of material misrepresentations. By evening, the phone in my kitchen rang. Grandma Dorothy. It was Tyler. His voice, once so confident, now trembled. I need to talk to you. Please. For a moment, hearing him call me Grandma again sent a pang through my chest. But I reminded myself of his words at graduation. Don't ever call me Grandma again. Tyler, I said calmly, I think you made it clear you didn't want me in your life. Please, you don't understand, he begged. This is destroying everything. I've lost my job. Amanda broke off the engagement. Her parents say I've ruined their foundation's reputation. I have to move out of the apartment. Grandma, my life is over. I let the silence hang, the same way he had left me standing by the fountain. Finally, I said, do you remember telling that reporter you were self-made? That no one had ever handed you anything? He groaned. I was just trying to look strong. To fit in. You don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like? I snapped, my voice steady with the weight of every sacrifice. Tyler, I sold my husband's wedding ring so you could finish your thesis project. I froze in my own home while you lived in a dorm with heat. I starved so you could eat. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like. He fell quiet. Then softly, what can I do? How do I fix this? I closed my eyes, remembering the little boy who once held my hand in the garden. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who had chosen lies over love. You can start, I said, by telling the truth. Admit who helped you. Admit the sacrifices you erased. And learn to say two simple words, thank you. I hung up. The scandal snowballed. Within days, federal authorities announced a review of all Washington Foundation grants. Northwestern expanded its investigation to dozens of students who had filed false aid claims. Hartwell and Associates lost its housing contract and filed for bankruptcy within the year. And Tyler? He vanished from the glossy pages of magazines as quickly as he had appeared. His face, once celebrated, became the symbol of entitlement and deceit. Dear listener, tell me honestly, do you think Tyler got what he deserved? Or was this revenge too harsh? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your heart. For me, there was an unexpected peace. Neighbors who had once pitied me now stopped by to say, you showed such courage. Letters poured in from grandparents across the country, people who had given, suffered, and been discarded by their families. Some wrote that my story gave them the strength to demand respect. Others said it saved them from being manipulated. One letter, however, surprised me most. It came from Amanda Washington. Dear Mrs. Miller, I owe you both an apology and a thank you. I was unkind to you, and for that I am ashamed. Exposing the truth about Tyler saved me from building a life on lies. Because of your courage, I've begun reforming how our foundation awards scholarships and prizes. I hope one day you will accept my gratitude and my apology. Respectfully, Amanda Washington. I folded the letter and placed it beside Frank's photo. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Justice had been served, but it wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my story. They tried to erase me. Instead, my name became a symbol of resilience. And though Tyler never called again, I no longer needed him to. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else, it's about finally honoring yourself. After the storm of headlines and investigations, life in Cedar Falls returned to its quiet rhythm. My small house still creaked with age, the clock Frank had built still ticked in the corner, and my mornings still began with a simple cup of coffee. But something inside me had changed. For decades, I had been defined by sacrifice, quiet, hidden, unacknowledged. Now, for the first time, my story had been told. Not as a plea for pity, but as a testament that love has limits when it is abused. News of the scandal spread further than I expected. Letters arrived by the hundreds. Grandparents wrote to me from across the country, sharing their own wounds. Grandchildren who forgot birthdays, children who borrowed money and never repaid, families who discarded their elders as though they were burdens. Each letter carried pain, but also relief that someone had spoken aloud what so many endured in silence. Community centers invited me to speak about financial awareness for seniors. Churches asked me to share my story during family events. I was no longer just Dorothy Miller from Maple Street. I was the grandmother who stood up. The honor was humbling, and for the first time, I felt my voice had power. Rebecca called more often, too. She apologized for not noticing how deeply I had sacrificed, and she visited more, bringing David along with groceries or supplies for the house. Though we never spoke much of Tyler, I could see in her eyes that she carried a mix of sorrow and anger at what he had done. As for Tyler himself, I only heard updates through the grapevine. He had left New York and returned to Chicago, working at a small firm that handled simple residential renovations. His engagement to Amanda was over, his reputation in ruins. Some whispered he had begun therapy, trying to understand how his choices had led to such devastation. Part of me pitied him, but a larger part knew the punishment fit the choices he had made. Then came the letter that surprised me most, Amanda's. Her words were careful, apologetic, almost tender. She admitted her cruelty in asking me to erase Tyler's past. She thanked me for saving her from tying her future to a man built on lies. She promised reforms within her foundation to ensure no prize or award would ever again be granted without proper truth. I wrote back, not with bitterness but with grace. Thank you for your honesty. May you use your position to protect others from deception. One afternoon, I stood in my living room, looking at the mantelpiece. For years, Tyler's graduation photo had been my pride and joy. I had removed it after the betrayal, unable to bear the sight of it. In its place now stood a different picture, one Jessica Chin had taken of me outside the New York Times building, holding the folder of documents that had toppled the lies. I studied that photo often. The woman staring back wasn't just a grandmother anymore. She was someone who had been underestimated, dismissed, humiliated, and yet had risen to speak truth. For the first time in years, I looked truly happy. Because here is the lesson I want you, my dear listener, to carry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in destroying another's life. It's in reclaiming your own dignity. Yes, Tyler wanted to erase me. Yes, he said I was an embarrassment. But in the end, his attempt to bury me made me unforgettable. My story became bigger than his lies. My name carried weight not because I was wealthy or powerful, but because I refused to be silenced. To you listening now, never believe your sacrifices go unseen. You may not always receive thanks. You may be cast aside or taken for granted. But your love, your giving spirit, your endurance, they matter. And when pushed to the edge, you too have the right to stand up and say, enough. So let me leave you with a prayer. May your days be free of betrayal. May your children and grandchildren honor you as the foundation on which they stand. May your home be warm, your table full, and your heart never questioned. May your sacrifices be remembered with gratitude, not discarded as burdens. And may you never forget your worth. Dear friend, if this story touched you, please subscribe to this channel, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your stories, your prayers, your hearts matter here. Because in the end, this is not just my story. It is the story of countless grandparents who gave everything, only to discover that sometimes the bravest act of love is learning to value yourself.